That was done as the result of a compromise, because had that not been put in, four southern judges would have stuck out and dissented. Ultimately, anyway, it came to Little Rock in Arkansas, and there was a governor called Governor Forbes. And Governor Forbes said, whoever it is, I will not take what the Supreme Court says the Constitution says it is, because I equally can interpret the Constitution for myself. And if I interpret it for myself, I say nothing doing. I'm not going to do any such thing. And ultimately, because of this face-off, the district judge there said that, look, we will now desegregate, but we will do this after 2.5 years, because just now things are too hot. And then that came up in appeal to the Supreme Court. Finally, the Supreme Court then, in a per curiam opinion, said that no, whatever we say the Constitution says is what it says. You are bound to follow what we say. Don't forget, the US Constitution doesn't have an Article 144 like us, which says all authorities shall act in aid of the Supreme Court. So, in order to say this, they required to band together and to say it is one Supreme Court who is telling you this, and you jolly well follow what the Supreme Court says. There also, Justice Frankfurter, of course, had to add his own bit. So, he undid the whole thing by saying Frankfurter J. concurring. Very similar to what happened here. Because here again, by way of an addendum, you had one other judge who is unknown speak about his views. So anyway, obviously this case was so earth-shaking that the bench felt that the country desired or should have a per curiam opinion. Of course, finally, reams and reams of oral evidence, documentary evidence, etc., were gone through by the main judgment, which was a rambling 1,000-page judgment. I have gone through it very carefully. And ultimately, it divided itself into various periods. The mosque itself was built in 1528. You remember the first battle of Panipat was 1526, so 2 years after. And then the mosque continues as a mosque until there is trouble in 1853. This is the first time there's trouble. And after there's trouble, just as the crown is due to take over in 1858 from the East India Company, there is a huge fracas. And as a result of the fracas, a wall is built. Sorry if I'm going to go back. One more wall. A wall is built by the British between what is called the inner courtyard and the outer courtyard. Now, inner courtyard means the precincts of the mosque proper. Outer courtyard is what is just outside those precincts. So a wall was built. And after that British wall, prayer was conducted by both sides, on both sides. So the outer courtyard, prayer was conducted by the Hindus, inner courtyard by the Muslims. So it's a recorded fact that prayer was conducted by both sides right from 1857 up till 1949. Very, very important fact. Of course, in between, there were two other very interesting incidents that took place. 1885, there was a Mahant Raghubar Das, who was the Mahant of the Ram Janambhumi area in the outside portion. And he filed 2 suits. And he said, I want to construct a temple over only the outside portion, because not only is there a Sita Rasoi there, which was already there, but we have now built a Ram Chabutra as well. And I want to build a temple on this, being owner. Both suits were dismissed. And first appeal dismissed, second appeal also dismissed. What is important to note is that the claim was only qua the outer courtyard, not the inner courtyard. 1934, again you have a riot, in which the 3 domes of the mosque are badly damaged. Reparations are made under some British commissioner, and the mosque is repaired. And then finally in 1949, after independence, in December, there are 50 to 60 people who stormed the mosque and who put idols in there, as a result of which all Muslim prayer ceased. And an important finding is given by the court saying that this doesn't mean that they abandoned the mosque. At no stage did they abandon the mosque. So, it is important therefore to note that each one was praying on either side of the wall for this long period from 1857 at least up till 1949. Of course, an ASI report is gone into in great detail. The ASI in 2003 did a huge amount of digging in the area. And they found a number of artifacts belonging to 9 periods in history. Very interesting. Beginning with Ashoka and pre-Ashoka. So 250 BC and before. And then you got into the Sugga period, Pushyamitra. After the Sugga period, then you came to the famous Kushan period. And from the Kushan period, you went on to the golden age of the Guptas. Now, all this time, you have got only little artifacts. Post-Guptas, you come to the Rajput period, which is a period from the 6th century to the 9th century AD. Here you find something very interesting, because you find a circular shrine. And the circular shrine is said to be probably Shaivite. This is again very interesting, because ultimately in the judgment, nothing is spoken about it being Shaivite. There's a finding earlier. It is called a Hindu shrine later. And after another 3 or 4 centuries, in the Sultanate and post-Sultanate period between the 12th century and the time the mosque was built, you finally had this huge structure under the mosque. And the huge structure was probably a temple, said the court, and probably a Hindu temple. Now, this was despite the fact that Buddhist and Jain artifacts were also found. But one important finding that the court came out with was that there was no Ram temple under the structure. That's a finding of fact. Extremely important. So with this finding of fact, they now proceeded to decide the suits. There were 4 of them. 1 on the Muslim side, 3 on the Hindu side, and 1 in the name of the deity. To decide the suits on possessory title, because you have to peg it somewhere in law. Now, the finding that the outer courtyard was used by the Hindus and therefore they had exclusive possession, no problem. All right. When we come to the inner courtyard, that's the mosque itself, there's a big problem. Because here, despite your finding that the Muslims were praying for this huge period from 1857 to 1949, you say, no, we can't say they were in exclusive possession, and this site was disputed. Now, it was disputed in the sense that there were egregious attempts to dislodge them, contrary to the rule of law, which is what the finding of the court is. And 3 times this happens. This doesn't happen once. So this happens in 1857, this happens in 1934, this happens again in 1942. And then you go on to say, therefore we can't say that this site is undisputed, whatever that means. And since this site is now undisputed, we can't say therefore that they have exclusive possession of this site. They, the Muslims. And therefore, since this is one composite whole, we now jump to the conclusion that the composite whole now belongs to the Hindus. This is the actual reasoning of the bench. And one other very, very important fact, that throughout this whole exercise, we are also told that every single time it's the Hindu side that has done something contrary to the rule of law. And for that, of course, reparations have to be made. What was the reparation? One would have thought, rebuild the mosque. No. The reparation was, we'll give them some land on which they have to build the mosque. So ultimately, we find that a great, at least in my humble opinion, great travesty of justice was that secularism was not given its due at all by these judgments. And as I told you, they've spoken in different voices. First two voices, then the second two voices, my voice and the voice of the five-judge bench. But there is one very important silver lining in all this, and that is the Places of Worship Act. Now, this act was specifically brought, as I told you, in the year 1990, in order that we do not have the Greek god of Janus governing us. What do I mean? Janus is two-headed, as you know. He's a Greek god. One face looks to the past, one face looks to the future. And because one face looks to the past will determine the future. The Places of Worship Act is the exact opposite. It is the Janus face looking behind is effaced. You will not look to the past. You will not try to counter historical wrongs by breaching the rule of law or by asking courts to do the same. And this very constitution bench spends 5 pages on it and says that it sounds in secularism, which is part of the basic structure, that you cannot look backwards, you have to look forwards. And what does the act say? Very important. Every religious place of worship is frozen to 15th August 1947. Now, anybody who tries to change this, and if there are suits pending at the stage of the act, which is in 1991, those suits will stand dismissed. Abate. If any suit says that the character has been changed, the suit will be disposed of in conformity with this act, which is the same thing, ultimately. And importantly, therefore, we have this frozen position as of 15th August 1947, so that short of Ayodhya, which was kept apart as a special case in those Places of Worship Act, all other places will at least be safe. And we find today, like Hydra heads popping up all over the country, there is suit after suit filed all over the place, now not only concerning mosques but also dargahs. And according to me, the only way of countering this, because all this can lead to, is communal tension and disarmament, contrary to what is envisaged in both our constitution and in the Places of Worship Act. The only way to scotch all this and to cauterize all these Hydra heads is by applying these 5 pages in this very judgment and having it read out before each district court and high court, because these 5 pages is a declaration of law by the Supreme Court which binds each of them. And once this is done, it is clear that the Places of Worship Act will take its due course. One other important thing, the minority judge in the High Court, Justice Sharma, had opined that this Places of Worship Act, as a matter of fact, does not operate pre-1991. So that if there's a conversion pre-1991, that won't be hit by the act. The judgment goes on to say this view is completely wrong and in the teeth of Section 4.2 of that act. So if this act were to be applied as stated in this judgment itself, it will easily cauterize all these Hydra heads, which are now popping up one after the other every day today.